Sort of like I've been doing with Sin episodes recently, I might take another stab at doing some gold source mapping. Because I've done it in the past, not a whole lot. Most of my mapping experience, just in general, has been with Source Engine and using Hammer Editor. And Worldcraft it's pretty similar, but it's different in ways that, like I'm so used to it in Hammer that the fact that it's not like that, like I can't fucking stand it. And it'll aggravate the shit out of me. And I can't remember off the top of my head what exact features are different, but I mean, that's kind of why it's been so long since I've fucked with gold source mapping. Although one of the things I do remember is that Jack, that was one of the reasons I used it, is because it pretty much functioned exactly like Hammer, as far as I remember. So I used that. I've used trenchbroom. I wasn't a huge fan of trenchbroom. I fucked with it a little bit. I actually used it to make Quake 1 maps. Um, but, Jack, at least, what I remember using it. And, I mean, fuck, dude, it's been like 10 years since I fucked with it. I probably still got the maps I did somewhere. I don't know. There's custom maps I've made, and I've mentioned them, not specifically, but just like in passing, like that I've made custom maps. But the specific ones I'm thinking about when I mention it, I've been looking for them. I've been having trouble finding them, and I'm not sure why. But I've just been kind of sifting through old stuff. So I've got all the WC map pack VMFs and, different leak VMFs and, my own personal VMFs. I've got thousands of those. Most of them are, like truly like original maps, but there's also, 5% of them or whatever where that, I decompiled some other map and was just fucking with it, adding my own shit to it. Sort of what I started talking about in the other video, like custom Counter-Strike maps from the past. Counter-Strike source, but also, when I think of it, I think mostly of like 1.5 or even like early 1.6. That was always one of the big appeals to me of the multiplayer stuff, was all the custom maps. Because one of the things I loved seeing was everybody put their own spin on shit. you know, like the different routes that they would add. And even though I hate Dust 2, like vanilla as a map, some of my favorite custom maps were actually like custom versions of Dust 2. Like, for an example, if they like take it and turn it into more of a industrial or urban environment, it's not really the layout that's the problem, although I'm not a fan of it. But I don't like the look of Dust 2. But some of them where they change the setting of it end up looking pretty cool, in my opinion. I thought the Condition Zero version of it looked good. Um, you know, the various versions on CSGO back in the day looked alright. But it always looked like shit, like particularly on Source for whatever reason. But that was the nice thing about the custom maps, is they either changed the setting, or even if that wasn't the case, or, not even Dust 2, but just maps in general. I liked seeing how they would add different routes to the maps. And I saw some video talking about that shit, and yeah, that was one of the appeals for me. And a lot of times I'll misremember different locations in a level, but it's because I end up realizing, oh, right, that was like a custom map. Like even with Soldier of Fortune 2, because I started playing it online in 2003. That game lasted forever in multiplayer. It was active until only a few years ago. Unfortunately, it's basically dead now, but the most prominent map that I always remember is a version of Jordan that is actually technically not vanilla. It's like I had to figure it out. But the version of Jordan I would always remember was actually a custom version. There's also one like that for like, MP underscore shop or whatever the fuck it is. But most of the maps I did, even like that, I never really released anything, but, if I made my own maps for Counter-Strike Source or 1.6 or whatever, um, or well, not 1.6, but Counter-Strike Source, or like with Gold Source, like for Half-Life 1. Half-Life 1, I used mostly Jack for that, just because it was so similar to Hammer. And I was fucking with Half-Life 2 and Counter-Strike Source so much early on. But most of the sort of re-envisionings of Gold Source type stuff that I did was actually me just decompiling uh, the Gold Source BSP to whatever you would need to do to import it into to Hammer for Source. Turn it from an RMF to a VMF. Or I think Hammer can open RMFs directly, can't they? I don't even remember at this point, because it's been so long even since I've done that. But yeah, usually if I'm ever gonna, like, if I've been playing a video game and I have it in my mind to make like a custom level in the spirit of that game, I'll find some way to shoehorn it into Hammer Editor for, Source Engine. So like Max Payne 2, Soldier Fortune 2, different games like that, like I'll actually import their textures into Source Engine. And I've been fucking with, Send episodes, and, just not really trying to make a proper map, but, I just do this stuff just because I enjoy it, but also I like, fucking with the textures. And I was in the mood to make something that looked like Sin episodes. But I don't know if I have my old install of Jack anywhere, so I might have to look into that. And I know that there was this map I made for Half-Life 1 that is sort of inspired by questionable ethics when you first get to the exterior, the way it looks from the outside, combined with certain parts of like the boot camp from opposing force, particularly that one part where you can see G-Man up above you out in the yard or whatever. I was making a map that looked something like that, and I didn't really put anything playable in it, but I was just, doing whatever came to mind with the Half-Life era textures. Most of the games I've had on Source Engine were just, at the time I wanted them to actually play them, but also a big part of it was to have the newer version of the engine and also the assets. So when I could actually make CSGO's editor work, for whatever reason it's not now, I would import everything from every other Source game to CSGO. So, Half-Life 2, EP1, EP2, Portal, Left 4 Dead 1 and 2, just everything into CSGO, and then also custom textures that I imported from, Max Payne 2 or Soldier Fortune 2 or whatever, like I mentioned. And for the longest time, I used CSGO as my basis just because it was the up-to-date version of the editor. I would just make shit to look pretty for the most part. So I've done actual playable maps here and there. Although, I mentioned this to a comment on somebody on a YouTube video like yesterday or whatever. Pretty much all the maps I ever played, made that were playable on like Counter-Strike Source or Plan of Attack or whatever, they're lost to time forever. Like they're like most of my shit, as much as I still have most of it, especially from 2004 to 2010ish, something like that, is basically gone forever. But like a lot of those maps I had made at the time, the only way you ever played them, because I never put them on FPS Banana or any shit like that, you would only known about it as if you joined the servers that I had created to test that particular compile out. Sometimes I think about that. I wonder maybe, somebody out there has, probably got the BSPs of my old maps because they were, they joined, my server at the time, and, maybe they got it on a hard drive somewhere. I always thought it would be cool to be able to, meet somebody that actually had that shit. But I mean, it's like a lot of other shit. It might truly be gone forever. And I hate that because like I don't have really anything left from like especially 2004 or 2005. 2006. I would say up until 2008 to 2010 pretty much is just, permanently doesn't exist anymore. But what I mentioned in one of the previous videos, the importance of sound design. So if 100% of the visuals is textures and lighting, the other 100% of the totality of the aesthetic is sound design. And that was something I was always good at as well, is that, I always got compliments on my lighting, but also my, the atmosphere as far as the sound effects and all that. And I keep thinking about, because I mentioned these sort of kind of creepypasta, paranormal, spooky shit with like G-Man and Ravenholm and like whatever shit like that. Or like the radio noises whenever you see him on the TV, on the like boat with the fucking crow on his shoulder or whatever. It always reminds me of this map I had made that was heavily inspired by Nova Prospect and Half-Life 2. But again, I was making it in CSGO, so it had tons of imported stuff, like, assets or whatever. But, no, actually, I guess, maybe it was the other way. I imported CSGO shit to Half-Life 2. It was probably episode 2 then. Yeah, because it had, I had zombies and different shit. But you start out in this flooded part of the prison, and you're sloshing through the water to get to the stairs, and there's this kind of like waiting area with a TV, and that was a big part of the map for me, is including, like, whenever you look at the TV, nothing shows up, but it plays the fucking weird music that plays on that, part where you see G-Man in City 17 when it's right at the start of Anti-Citizen 1 or whatever. But I had a bunch of, scripted sequences, like you gotta electrocute a zombie and it like blows up and like the door opens and the water actually like pours out and whatever the fuck. But yeah, I've been thinking about that one and I have no clue where it's at. A lot of the maps that I cared about the most, I mean, I've looked and looked and looked, and I don't know, maybe they're on a drive somewhere and I'm just not looking on the right one or in the right spot. Or one of them I found screenshots for at a point, but now I can't find them again. And that's happened like 3 or 4 fucking times in the last couple years. But one of the things about my maps is that I usually try to go for more realistic layouts, or at least believable layouts. Although I do really like the sort of abstract, impressionistic, whatever you want to call it, sort of, impossible geometry, OSHA violation hell shit of like older first person shooters, especially Half-Life, right? Like the giant fucking bottomless pit under a giant fan, or, like whatever bullshit like that. And I think I might do that as a separate video, especially because I'm getting pretty close out of time on this one. But, yeah. People, because I've been watching a lot of videos about Half-Life and all that, and that's something people love to talk about, is how just kind of crazy out of proportion everything is, and all these, these, platforms, or bridges, or, whatever, with no fucking handrail that's right above a bottomless pit and shit like that. And as I mentioned before, as I mentioned yesterday when I was commenting on some of those videos, if you've ever tried to make stuff with realistic layouts that not only is OSHA compliant, but also like building code compliant and shit like that, you'll start to realize why video games never do it. The big part of it is that it's pretty stifling for the creativity. If you try to do realistic layouts, there's a lot of stuff you end up not being able to do. And, real life is not optimized for gameplay, unfortunately. But it is cool to see motherfuckers' imagination run wild with the shit, the MC Escher shit. But I do also like to see attempts at realistic interpretation.